Have you ever been out and you photographed an absolutely amazing sunrise or sunset, but you get back on the computer and you start working on the image and it's just kind of meh? In this video, I'm going to show you how to transform those sunrises and sunsets into breathtaking masterpieces using just a little bit of Lightroom and Nik Color Efex. This can be done in a matter of a couple of minutes. You're going to learn how to make your photos radiate the warmth and drama of the moment. So let's dive in and elevate your sunset photography. All right, so here's an image that I took down at the beach one evening. I just love the way that the light was illuminating the back of the sand dunes here. And so I captured this is a single image, it's not an HDR. And you can see by my histogram that I've preserved all of my highlights and my shadows. Not bad. It's pretty rare. So I'm going to start by cropping this image because I just feel like there's too much empty space up here. So let me remove the constraint on the original. So I'm actually going to turn this into more of a pano looking image. So there we go. With most images, I tend to come and do a few adjustments that are just super quick. So I'm going to hold the shift key, double click my highlights, my shadows, my whites, and my blacks. And I think it did too much. So I am going to drag this back to taste. There we go. I don't need the shadows to be that bright, then it looks like an HDR, which I'm not a huge fan of. And a little bit of dehaze. I'm going to see if I can remove some of the blue tone here and make it neutral. All right, so here is a quick before and after. All right, I think making the sand a little bit more neutral colored actually brings out a little bit more of the contrast between the sand and the dune grasses here, which I like. All right, so I can crank up the vibrance and the saturation and I can see exactly what colors I am dealing with. So I've got lots of yellows, some purples, blues, greens, and there's a little bit of purple still here in the foreground. So double click on both of those and bring them back to 0. That is a little trick that I do kind of to see if I have a color cast because say my monitor's not calibrated properly or I'm just in a room with some strange ambient light going on. I can typically come in here and crank up the vibrance and the saturation to 100 and I can tell immediately if I have a wicked color cast and correct for it. All right, I see an immediate improvement in this image, but I am going to push this a little bit further and I'm going to do most of that work in Color Efex. So here we go. So right click, edit in, and I'm going to process this in Nik Color Efex 7. All right, so I'm going to show you my one go-to filter in a minute. So first I'm going to do a little detail extractor. So this, I really don't want it to crunch up my sky too much, so I'm going to use the graduated control line. So I am going to limit this by clicking down here and dragging up from the bottom. And I'm going to move this in here. It's really kind of hard to tell what is being affected, so I love using the masks here. So I'm going to click on the mask, and you can see when I drag this around how it's highlighting all of the tonal values and the colors as well. So I really just want this being applied to these dune grasses right here. So I want more detail there. So everything in white is going to be primarily excluded. All right, so let's turn that mask off and go before and after. You can see how it just brought out a little bit more detail right there, right where I wanted you to focus the eye. Exactly what I wanted. Something that you might consider from time to time is the sunlight filter. If you want to add an ethereal glow to your image, this is definitely going to be one of my go-tos. I'm not going to use it on this photo, so I'm going to X that out, but I am going to do my absolute favorite, which is the Skylight Filter. When I shot film, I used a real Skylight Filter on most of my sunrises and sunsets, so I'm going to mimic the same look here. Why not? So I'm going to click the Add button, and I'm noticing that I do not like what it's doing to the yellow. I like what it's doing to my foreground, and I like what it's doing to this sky up here, but I'm not a huge fan of the yellow. So I am going to take a control point, and I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key on a Mac, and I'm going to click in the yellow, and I'm going to drag this out. I just do not want that much influence from yellow. Let me see that mask. Yeah, so that's exactly what I want to do. I want to remove the effect, so anything that's in white is not being affected. And I might change the opacity a little bit there. There we go. So it's just a little punch. If I wanted to add some real color up here, just change these colors and tones up here, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up to graduated filters. So I'm going to click on plus. That is not the color I want. So I'm going to come over here and go all the way down, and I can do an orange. I'm actually going to do a red. And I do like to crank up the opacity and take the blend down so that I can see exactly where the vertical shift is. So don't be afraid to crank those out and make it look absolutely heinous for a quick moment. So that's that. And now I can change the blend and lower that opacity. There we go. So let's look at the before. That's without it, and that's with it. I like that little bit of pink. That's what I do sometimes if my sunset is lacking in that kind of pink and lavender color. That's just my style. That's one of my preferences. So if you actually look at my website and see my sunrise and sunset photos, you will see that common theme, that they have kind of an underlying, or sometimes very in your face, kind of obvious lavender hue to them. And that's just because that's the way that I like them. If you want this to be more blue, go for the blue. That's the beauty of it. It is yours to play with. All right, so let's see a before and after of those simple adjustments. So here's before and after. Now it's got some punch. I like that. If I wanted to add a little bit more punch to my foreground, I might go with a tonal contrast. You can see how that really does start increasing noise. You can see it very plainly up here in the clouds. I'm not a fan. So tonal contrast right out of the gate, I almost always just 50% opacity. That thing is usually just way too much. And then I think I'm going to add a luminosity. Boom. Let's see that mask. And we are just going to crank this down, and I'm going to add another control point. Hold down the Alt or Option key to remove. And I'm definitely going to remove it from most of this area here. Let's do that. I just want more detail in my foreground. I do not want it to be messing with my sky. And I'm going to have to invert that one. Make sure that it concentrates only in here. So let's see our before and after. There we go. All right, and from here I can just click apply. I do want to make sure that non-destructive edits is clicked on so that I don't lose any of my ability to come back in here and make changes in the future. All right, so side by side, here is the original and here is the one that I altered in Color Efex. I might go ahead and bring that into the develop module again. I kind of feel like the foreground is a little too bright. So I'm going to make a sky selection and then I'm going to invert it so everything but the sky is selected. So let's invert that. And there we go. So everything in green is selected, and I'm just going to kind of bring my blacks down a little bit, give it a little bit more contrast. There we go. So here's a before and after of just doing that to the foreground. Just a little bit more punch. All right, so here's a little trick that you can do within Lightroom itself, and you can do this in Camera Raw as well, or anything else that will allow you to do some selective masking. So I'm going to click on the mask tool right here. I am in the develop module, and I'm going to click on range, and I'm going to say color range because I do want to target this specific color. So you can see once I click on that, it has selected all of that kind of soft, glowing orange tone that is coming from my sunrise, which is off to my left. All this takes is a little tweak, in the temperature. So if I warm it, you can see what happens. Cool it. I'm doing this dramatically so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to warm it. And if you also like that kind of magenta lavender tint to your sunrises and sunsets, you can do that here as well. So I'm going to crank it all the way to the right and all the way to the left so you can adjust it to your taste. If you want a little bit more green in there, I don't really know why, but you could, or you could adjust it with a little touch of magenta as well. And you can increase the saturation of that as well. This is just another option for you. So let's close that. Let's see before and after. You can see, let me zoom in on this a little bit. All right, so here is before and after. That's a big change to that color. I may not normally push it quite that far, but I just wanted to see what it is capable of doing. I actually like this a lot better than the original photo, just because of that emphasis on the color. All right, here's another sunset photo, and I'm gonna basically do the same type of thing. Hold the shift key, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks. Let's see. Here's before and after. It kind of shifts the light into the foreground a little bit, and I'm not sure I'm crazy about that. So I might bring my blacks down a little bit further. There we go. Now you can see if I crank up vibrance that it's grabbing all of those colors, and I really don't want to do that. I do want to do my lavender here. So I'm going to bring this into Color Efex. Okie dokie. Let's just go ahead and go straight to Skylight Filter and see what happens. You see on the previous image it did a lot. On this one it's not doing as much. So if I have to crank that all the way up to see an effect, just do it. It's not hurting anything. So I am going to emphasize the Skylight Filter. I love what it's doing to these clouds up in here. Not so nuts about what it's doing in the foreground. So more often than not, I am going to pick and choose where this Skylight Filter is being applied. And I can do that with the control points. So I'm going to add a control point. I'm going to hold the Alt-Option key to turn it into a minus, and I'm going to bring it away from my yellows and oranges in the foreground here. And I may have to do this twice because I dropped it right on a yellow and it's not really grabbing the oranges in there. So I'm going to change my luminance a little bit. So we're grabbing more and more and a little less picky with the chrominance. So these sliders are absolutely fantastic. It will change this control point that I've created and make it either more or less selective. So I drag it to the left, it's getting much less selective, so you can see it's just kind of grabbing the whole area there. If I make it to the right, it's getting more and more selective, so only grabbing the yellow. So I don't necessarily have to add another control point in order to take care of this. I can just adjust the values of this particular control point. There we go. So let's turn that off. That's better. All right. So if I do a before and after, you can see that it did beef up that sunset in the foreground, but not as much attention as it did to these clouds up here. And that's really what my goal was here, is to kind of bring out these pinks a little bit more. And I think I was successful with that. So let's do a side by side. Yeah, look at those clouds. Look at the difference in those clouds. Absolutely fantastic. One filter, that's all it took. Skylight Filter, one little filter. So you see, it doesn't take much to turn an okay sunset into an awesome sunset that you love. But you do have to get out there and capture it first. Okay, that I didn't say that in the beginning, but that goes without saying. For more tips on Lightroom, go ahead and click here. And if you want to learn color effects from scratch, go ahead and click right here. There is a full tutorial for you. I have a link in the description to DxO. If you happen to click on it and end up making a purchase, you are helping to support this channel because I get a little bit of a commission from them, and I do appreciate it. Have a great day.